this guy on Thursdays, I almost feel like I could meet with our favorite attorney every day. It just seems as though so many issues in American life involve the legal system, so many issues in American life concerning the highest profile among us. I'm talking about the former president, many legislators involve the legal system, constitutional rights, what's constitutional, what's not. That involves the legal system. When it comes to those questions, he is without peer. The former federal prosecutor who has correctly forecast the outcome on so many of these cases, the most recent of which was the Gene Carroll case in New York. Please welcome the great David Katz. Yes.
Great to be with you, Mark.
And with a terrific framing of David Katz. It's terrific. You look, can I say it? You look better than I do.
Now, getting better all the time, like the Beatles song.
Yeah, it is it. Albert, should he receive the rod at the beginning or the end of our segment?
I think the beginning is fair. Like we could reiterate it when the time
comes. David, if you would please, this is for your distinguished service. You need to do nothing but just sit there. You
receive the rod of equity and mercy.
Yeah. So now you have received it. Now, no acceptance speech necessary. It's all done.
You don't put the rod on my shoulder? Good to go. Is this like being knighted or rodded?
Smashed it with your iron rod.
Right now it's metaphorical, but it might take on an actual corporeal reality at some point. Yeah. David Katz, first, I want to start with what you correctly predicted, which was the outcome of this Gene Carroll case. I wonder if you could just review for us what happened and where we are and that jury decision.
Well, I thought it was very interesting, not just the case, but also the reporting. You know, the right-wing media kind of didn't report it at all. The left-wing media, if you want to call it that, misreported two things. First of all, he was not convicted. He was not found guilty. And it's important for people to understand that and to get that part of it right. This was a civil case. He can't go to jail in this case. The second thing was that she made rape allegations, and the rape allegations were not accepted by a preponderance of the evidence by the jury. Now, they found that he had committed sexual assault, and they also found that he had defamed her. And, you know, being a federal prosecutor and now a criminal trial lawyer, and I love to follow trials. It's just something that fascinated me since I was about 14 years old. And just followed them. I followed the Chicago 7 breathlessly when it was merely reported in the newspapers back under the Nixon administration. And that was, of course, Abby Hoffman and Jerry Rubin, Bobby Seale, that cast of characters who ultimately were never convicted finally of anything. And they had kind of a crazy judge.
They had a horrible judge, didn't they? I mean, he was really
a very willful federal judge whose last name was also Hoffman. So Abby Hoffman, the yippie prankster, was always joking around that he might be his long-lost son or nephew or something like that. And of course, they did that wonderful movie about that a few years ago. But anyway, what was interesting about the case is, you know, there are jury consultants, there are trial lawyers like myself who've been watching it for decades. Juries often will surprise you with their, if you want to call it, common sense. And there were 9 of them. Remember, they had to be unanimous, Mark, by a preponderance of the evidence, but they still had to be unanimous. They decided the case in 3 hours. And you think that some people went back there and said, you know, rape, I just don't know. It was 27, 28 years ago. It all happened so fast. Obviously, something happened to her. She perceived a situation which was rape. We believe her to that point. But as to whether rape really happened that fast, if we can really be sure of that in our verdict. So probably 2 or 3 of them started to say that. Remember I said last week, imagine if you were the 9 angry persons like the 12 angry men in the Henry Fonda movie, what would you have done? So I think 3 of them probably started to express those doubts, but all 9 of them thought there was some kind of sexual assault. So they said, you know what, instead of debating this for days, but what they gave Trump's side, because he will, you know, be ballyhooing this verdict, believe it or not, he'll say, as his lawyer did after the verdict came down against Trump, he said, I thought this was a rape case. Where was the rape? You know? Why would anybody believe any of this? It was a hoax. Where was the rape? Sexual assault is, of course, bad enough. And the defamation, was that he said many things, including he didn't do it. If he had just said, I didn't do it, especially when he was president, that probably would have been protected. And probably a jury wouldn't have found him that he defamed her. But he put her down in so many ways. The she wasn't my type, the whole manner in which he went about it. He made it so personal and vengeful. And he looked like an accused, frankly, who got caught with an accurate accusation and was just trying to trash his accuser. He didn't handle it in any kind of professional or dignified way, which, was basically what the court said. They said, a president, senator is allowed to say when someone sues them, even for extra professional conduct, in other words, not conduct while they were president or senator, they can say, I didn't do it. This is false. When you go on to liar, not my type, all the put downs. So I thought that those two verdicts were pretty obvious. And I think that those will be affirmed on appeal. Just to talk about that case for just a minute, what is sort of interesting, and people should think about it, it's so easy to get political and, Trump deserved it and Trump did so many things and he was accused by 26 women. Believe me, I get it. It's like Harvey Weinstein, enough already. But if you look back at the Cosby trial, people may recall that the first time he got charged, they had a hung jury. And there was maybe only one prior similar act. When he went to trial the second time, there were many prior similar acts, and he was convicted. And the problem with these prior similar acts, don't think about Trump, Weinstein, or Cosby. Think about precedent. Think about people listening out there. If it's almost always a man who's accused. So imagine if it were your son, your nephew, your husband, who got charged with one of these things. And once you allow in some prior similar acts, boy, it sure does become what we call character evidence, Mark. It sure does become, you're a bad guy, about time you got convicted of something. It does detract attention from the actual charge and whether you're guilty beyond a reasonable doubt of the actual charge. Now, in Trump's situation, and this will be his issue on appeal, he'll say, look, I wasn't found liable of the rape. I was found liable of a sexual assault. That was close. Right? They found me not liable of the main charge against me, and they found me liable of the middle charge. So it was a close case, 3 hours of deliberations or not. And the judge let in two prior similar acts. Now, this event at Bergdorf Goodman's was in about 95 or 96. The judge let in a prior similar act from the 70s where he groped, and I think including groping the genital area with her clothes on, of a fellow passenger on an airplane. Okay. Awful. Who would do that? If people maybe listening say, well, my brother, my husband, my nephew wouldn't have done anything like that. He wouldn't have done the one he got charged with at Burgos, and he wouldn't have done the prior similar act. And if he did, they ought to bring it in. But think about that. It's from the 70s. So the case is from 27 years ago. The prior similar act is from 47 years ago. It's 20 years separate from what it's supposed to be so similar to. So that will be the argument. But because especially there was a touching, groping of the genital area, I think they're going to say that was similar enough. I think the Court of Appeals will say that was similar enough. The other one is where someone came to interview him at Mar-a-Lago, and he cornered this reporter who was female and basically kind of mashed her and gave her an involuntary kiss. That I think will probably also survive because it's a little bit like the dressing room, right? It's the sudden cornering and the assault. So I think it will survive on appeal. Then he'll have the problem of trying to collect. She'll have the problem of trying to collect her $5 million. Trump, I think, will prove to be hard to collect from. But I think in the end, I think after 2024, he'll lose. And then I think he'll have a big incentive to go around and settle these cases and get these headaches behind him. Whether that's right or it's wrong, I think she will collect some money. I think she will win in the end. And that's the good news.
And talking about getting the money, because in the chat, people have been commenting since the judgment that, she'll never get the money. And it's simply moving the money around in different shell corporations or whatever. Is that why the money is so elusive? It would seem as though he clearly, manifestly has a lot of money.
He has access to a lot of money, but he'll have it, yes, tied up in trusts. And if eventually you have to go against Mar-a-Lago or some piece of property, there's a homestead exemption, which I understand in Florida is huge. I mean, you might think of a small single family house that you might want to protect for some person who's had it like their whole life. That's always the argument for a homestead exemption. But when it's Mar-a-Lago and it's worth millions of dollars, what a person would do without the homestead exemption is they would simply borrow $5 million against the Mar-a-Lago, they'd pay off the debt on Mar-a-Lago, and they'd pay the $5 million to the victim who had a judgment against them. Some of it may be locked up in trust. And, he may be one of those people. I've represented some people like that. They have this knack of borrowing money. And so they really are not solvent, but they get people to lend them money.
Well, that's what the Deutsche Bank revelations that even preceded his election, they all pointed to that he was just, they were in thrall of his, charisma, potential political dominance. And as a result, they gave him a bunch of money that he normally, by all means, if you do a credit check, would not have been entitled to.
Big banks are supposed to lend not on your charisma, but on your balance sheet and proven ability to repay. You might want to lend money to Argentina because it's great fun to go down to Buenos Aires and be the international banker.
But
Trump,
David,
Trump's supposed charisma. It's just totally.
But it sounds funny. But if you read the reports, I think some of it's even in Jane Mayer's reporting in the New Yorker in her book Dark Money. She talks about the fact that there were essentially bankers, Deutsche Bank bankers, who were dealing with private equity, and they were completely taken by being wined and dined and flown in different places on the Trump plane. And they really did. In a sense, it was just all smoke and mirrors and charisma.
Well, Trump is back flying people around the country. He's flying some of these reporters around to try to get favorable coverage and so forth. And of course, he insulted her, demeaned her last night during the CNN opportunity, this opportunity that CNN gave him to, have a fawning Republican audience and to have people chortling over the fact that he had been in this civil litigation and lost it. It was just astonishing to me. And I think you had asked me the question off the air whether he could sue her for defamation again. And
yes, thank you. Yeah, please. So no, wait a minute. It would be her suing him again for what he said in the CNN town hall. Could she do that? Because he seemed to just fire up the old, I never met this woman before, I don't know what that. So far, based on your answers earlier, it sounds like he probably can get away with that, maybe. Go ahead, tell me, can he be re-sued in a way?
Yes, she absolutely could re-sue him. Think about it. You sue somebody for assault, and on the way out of the courtroom, when you successfully get a judgment for assault, they hit you again.
Yeah.
And he basically hit her again. Now, whether whack job, he'll say whack job is a fair comment on the fact that she sued him for rape and the jury did not find in her favor on rape. The whole narrative again, it was a rape case and they didn't find him liable for rape. And who but a whack job would charge somebody with rape and not know whether she got raped? The jury didn't. They seem to think so. That'll be his narrative. But I think that again, it's the whole context. It's what he says. So I think that probably her lawyers will send his lawyer a letter saying, cease and desist. What you're doing is just renewed defamation. And then if it goes on, they may or may not take 3 or 4 of the instances of very public defamation of her by Trump and sue him again. The question is, sort of what's in it for them. They have an angel who paid them $10 million to bring this litigation so far. And if the angel wants to throw another $5 million into it, and it's a righteous series of defamations, then yes, they may sue him again. The risk that they have is they have to go through that ordeal again. And can you imagine they get a different judge, a different jury, and that jury says, no, it wasn't defamation. And you think, wow, I just bit off a little bit more than I wanted to chew there, because, different judge, different jury, different times, right? So you're taking a chance when you've won, you've won. Why take a chance of losing or not winning round 2?
Okay, I'm going to get to George Santos here in 30 seconds. But before I do, I want to ask you a question that has nothing to do with forecasting a legal outcome or even legal doctrine. How come it's so expensive to bring one of these cases? You just mentioned $5 million. That's just an insane amount of money. Why, David Katz, is it so expensive to get justice or a shot at justice in this country?
Well, civil litigation is expensive in the first place. That's why a lot of people try to avoid it. Rightly or wrongly, there are arbitration clauses. Even big companies try to avoid it because it's expensive and there are risks. And
expensive because of the staffing that's required to bring a case, or why is it expensive?
Well, first of all, good lawyers, can charge $600, $700, $800 an hour. I try to charge a little bit less. I try to have a bit of a discount because we don't have a whole lot of crazy overhead. But the big firms have a lot of crazy overhead. They also have some very good lawyers, and so people with a lot at stake, they want to hire. I mean, a lot of times I hope they want to hire me, but a lot of times they figure, I want to hire a 100-lawyer law firm, and it's someone who's got a mindset to hire a 50 or 100-lawyer law firm is not going to have Katz and Associates, no matter how good we are. There are just some people with that mindset. So now you're not just every meeting. You've got your $900 lawyer, $900 an hour lawyer. Then you've got the two associates that are billing out at $400 an hour. And, when you go to court, when they were in court, there were 6 lawyers on each side. In fact, she said, my friend told me right after this happened back in 95 or 96, Gene Carroll said, my friend told me, don't sue. He'll send an army of lawyers after you. And in fact, look over at the 2 tables right there. She was exactly right. Look at the army of lawyers after me. And then Trump wanted to show, well, yeah, but she had an army of lawyers on her side too. And the judge said, move on. But there were an army of lawyers on both sides. So that costs money. And then people bring appeals. They try to bring what are called interlocutory appeals. They try to appeal certain rulings. And they, somebody gets a subpoena and they're an important witness and they have litigation over the subpoena. And then, part of the $5 million is they tend to fund the other lawyers in the case. A lot of these law firms have go-to lawyers that they will send witnesses out to in cases. Supposedly there's no conflict of interest. And that can be a quandary. But, they're paying the fees. Right. In a lot of states like California, there's a duty to indemnify. And so in a case like that, you may have to pay the fees.
The insurance, in effect, the fee to indemnify. Let me ask you then, finally, in our last minute. I mean, that does sort of lay it out. Wow, it's a very complicated process and an expensive process. What of George Santos? The feds have finally come for him. Multiple charges. I wonder if you could give us some sense of that case, please.
Well, the late night comedians have kind of covered his case to the point that I'm kind of done, I have been at that courthouse. I actually had a federal case out there recently. If I can toot my own horn, it got a great result. My client got a much lesser sentence than the government wanted, which is winning often when you're a criminal defense attorney. We don't just try everything, guilty, not guilty. We try to settle cases, if appropriate, with a disposition that the client and the family can live with. But I was out there with my nephew on a Sunday, and El Chapo was coming in on Monday. So the marshals were around making sure that the manhole covers were all soldered shut so that he wouldn't escape from an American courthouse or prison like he had so many times in Mexico. It's a really interesting courthouse. They've had a lot of interesting cases. There's a whole new there's a district called the Southern District of New York. Everyone makes fun of it, the Sovereign District of New York. A lot of the Trump cases were there. Michael Cohen was there. The Wall Street cases tend to be there. But the airports are out in Queens. And so that Eastern District of New York, Queens, Brooklyn, and Long Island, they have a lot of interesting cases. And this is one of their interesting cases because Santos is a Congress member from out there. I mean, it seems to me that some of the charges, you can argue back and forth, do people really get charged with taking $20,000 from unemployment insurance when they're making another $120,000? The answer is they do. Some of it can look a little bit like directed at Santos, but his lawyer will try to take it in isolation, Mark. When you add the whole thing together, it's obvious to me that he's a fraudster. I think they're going to prove that he's a fraudster on many fronts. He stole from his own contributors. Apparently, he bought luxury clothing with money that was supposedly going to his campaign. I think that he'll probably be convicted. So I'll go on record on that one. That'll be my 7th accurate prediction in a row.
Nostradamus has spoken again.
May not get credit for that one because that one may seem like a little bit too much of a layup. But he seems like a fraudster to me on many fronts.
Yeah. The misuse of campaign funds, they get you on that. They take that seriously. And then, as you say, there's, they call it money laundering and, the unemployment benefits when you actually have a job. There are enough ways for, it would seem, for prosecutors to hit the target on this one that, so it goes. And yet his vote is critical. This is a political part of this to bringing Kevin McCarthy into the speakership and also to getting that budget passed. You needed George Santos's vote. So he's he's performing and has performed an extremely important role for the GOP in the House. David, thank you. Love talking about this stuff, which I have only, and many of us only have a little sliver of knowledge, and you really, you light it up. And I think as a result, Albert, I think he should receive the rod of equity and mercy on the way out.
Receive the rod of equity and mercy.
Yes. David, thank you. Till next
Great
week.
to be with you, Mark.
Yeah,
Have a great weekend, everyone.
You too, my friend. David Katz, everybody. Bravo, bravo. Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.